high as it goes, your phone. Barbara, are you there? Barbara? All right, while they get Barbara on the phone, I'm going to open the meeting and call the meeting to order. There. That's all you need to do is Bill. Okay, shall we proceed with the normal course of business in terms of the Pledge of Allegiance, etc.? Bill, would you lead us one more time?
Thank you.
Pledge to the flag of the United States of America and republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you'd please remain standing for a moment of silence, not only for all of those who serve our countries in war and in peace, but for the people of Ukraine. Thank you. Or would you please take a roll? Here.
President Lynn Tartaglia here.
Vice President.
Vice President Barbara Milano.
Here.
Treasurer Janine Menard
Here.
Secretary Barbara Kowalski here. Director Bill Hooks. Director Dave Sherwood.
Here.
The Director Rich Gigliotti. All quorum is.
Thank you. Okay, we've called this special board meeting to deal with both an issue that has arisen as well as our proposed resolution for that issue. I'm going to start out with making a motion, looking for a second. We'll then describe what the situation is. We'll get some input from several people, including our attorney of record for the association, Andrew Speranzini, who joins us here at the table today. We'll have a general board discussion, take input from any owner who may have comments or questions, and then take a vote on the motion. And that will be the same process we'll use for the second motion. So to kick it off, we've got two very important processes that happen simultaneously each year in March. Those are the annual meeting, which requires a quorum of at least 126 owners, either in person or by proxy, in order to be called to order. And then we have the annual elections, which also happen in March, which do not require a quorum, but have very strong and strict legal requirements on how they are to be done and handled in order to be considered valid. We as a community have carried out the communications and documentation for both of these things simultaneously for quite some time because they both happen at the same time and at the same meeting. We've determined that the process for handling ballots is not in compliance with Florida law, the details of which Andrew will explain in a minute. The error that was made this year was completely unintentional and inadvertent. No one involved had any knowledge that the process that they were following was not in accordance with the law. And as soon as it was brought to the attention of all those involved, we immediately stopped the process. Let me just give you a little context for what we're talking about. The team leader for the elections for the past number of years, reporting to the Secretary of Record, has been Bill Kalman. Bill informed Barbara Kowalski, the current secretary, that he would no longer be able to fulfill that responsibility and recommended that another resident and a former board member and president, Dwight Eastman, take on that task for us this year in 22. Barbara spoke with Dwight and he agreed to do so, and he began the process of working with the office according to the regular use process. Dwight, maybe you could share with the board at this point sort of what occurred up until the point you and Richard had a conversation in the office.
Yes, this is on. Okay. as you indicated, I agreed to be the chair of the election committee. So we'll be setting up next week to register people in and all that sort of thing. The secretary came to me, I guess, early last week and said that Terry Marie was kind of snowed under with work and would have difficulty registering in the returning envelopes that were sent out to all owners. And would I be interested in helping out doing that? And I said, certainly I would. So I basically came into the office and said, what do you want me to do? And I was shown a fairly straightforward process. I was given a printout with all of the with all of the owners listed by unit number. And there was 4 things to do with each envelope. Number 1, looking at the envelope, check it off as received for that particular owner. The second thing was to look at the proxy, open that envelope and determine if they were coming to the meeting or they were not coming to the meeting. It's okay. And the 4th thing was to check off if a ballot had been received. So fairly straightforward. And that I was proceeding to do that, and Richard popped in, and Richard said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "This is what I'm doing." And he said, "Whoa, you can't do that. The regulations do not allow you to open that outside envelope." So I said, "Well, how do I know if they're coming to the meeting? How do I know if they're sending in a proxy? Because we're going to need quorum to have the meeting next week." He said, "That has to be done when the meeting has been opened and there are audiences here." And I immediately stopped doing what I was doing. I went and looked up the regulations, and sure enough, that's exactly what should have happened. Okay. As you said, it wasn't intentional. The thing about, I want to assure you, is that the ballots were in that envelope. Sealed envelopes were very carefully deposited in the ballot box, locked ballot box, which is in the office. So no ballots were opened. We're simply trying to determine who was coming to the meeting and who was not coming to the meeting. And I take full responsibility for this. I didn't properly research it. I could have done that. I should have done that in retrospect. And just to make sure there was no slip ups, I didn't do that. But I can tell you that A, no ballots were disturbed, and B, there was no intention to coerce or do anything of that nature. I was simply trying to help out.
Thank you. Appreciate that very much. And, I appreciate you taking responsibility, and it's not the job of a volunteer to have to voluntarily go out and look up Chapter 718 Florida law. That's a responsibility of the board to make sure that the volunteers are fully informed and understand what the law is. And so we dropped the ball on that. Thanks, Dwight. I appreciate it. I'm going to ask Andrew now to take over to explain sort of the difference between the treatment of proxies and ballots here for us. Andrew?
Okay. Hi, everybody. And I'll try to be as brief as I can. Condominium associations, unlike homeowner associations, are very heavily regulated by the statutes with respect to the conduct of their elections. And so I'll reiterate a little bit of what was already said. Typically speaking, obviously you have 2 documents that are being returned for the annual meeting. You've got the election ballot and you've got the limited or general proxy, depending on if anything else is being voted on. Proxies can be opened immediately. There's nothing in the law that says that you have to wait and open a proxy in the presence of the membership. However, the outer election envelope, which has to be signed by the owner, you're not allowed to validate those, and you're not allowed to open them until you have called the annual meeting to order, and you must do that in the presence of the membership. What does it mean to validate an outer envelope? What do I mean by that? Well, as you know, you typically, when a condominium association sends its notice for the annual meeting, it gives two envelopes, a small blank envelope where the owner, when they vote for the election of directors, they fold their ballot and put it in that small unmarked envelope and seal that envelope. And then they take that envelope and they put it inside the outer envelope and they seal the outer envelope. And then the outer envelope, by law, must be signed by the appropriate owner. What do I mean by the appropriate owner? Your documents in Article 4, Section 8 of your bylaws, also in Article 5 of your declaration, has what I just call a voting certificate requirement. Any unit that is owned by more than one person or by a corporation or other entity, they have to provide a voting certificate designating which of the owners is the designated voting member. Your documents, unlike many others, don't even have an exception for husbands and wives. So even a husband and wife have to do this. If there is no voting certificate on file for that unit, it's as if that unit does not exist. You disregard that unit and they have no right to vote. So, for example, if I have a twin brother, Tony, not surprising, right? Andrew and Anthony. So if, let's say, I owned a unit with my twin brother, okay, here in this condominium, Andrew and Anthony Speranzini would then have to submit a voting certificate designating which one of us is the voting member, either me or my brother. If we don't have the right to vote. And if you get an outer envelope back from us and it's signed, I don't care who it's signed by, we don't have a voting certificate. I sign it, my brother signs it, doesn't matter. You would mark it disregard. And I would usually put no voting certificate. I would explain why. That's what you mean by validating. So obviously a single person, if I owned a unit alone, obviously no brainer, right? I'd have to sign it. I'm the sole owner. I just explained with me and my brother, or if it was XYZ Inc., okay, XYZ Inc. would submit a voting certificate designating what employee or officer or shareholder or whatever of that corporation was a designated voter. If that is not on file, they don't have, you mark the envelope disregard. If it's signed by the wrong owner, so if me and my brother submit a voting certificate and we designate Andrew Speranzini as the voting member, but the envelope was mistakenly signed by my brother, disregard. If a unit is owned by Mr. and Mrs. Speranzini, but the title is held in my name only, and my wife mistakenly signs the envelope thinking that she had the right to do that, disregard, not signed by owner. Okay, you understand? That's what it means to validate the outer envelopes. I know that takes a lot of time. And so a lot of our clients, unbeknownst to them, violate the statute because they want to save time. So they do that validation process in advance, not in front of the members. The only opportunity you have to do that under the Florida laws is if you do it the same day. So if, like, let's say you're going to have your annual meeting at 3 p.m., but to save time, so you don't have to go through that validation process, you want to validate at 9 a.m. You can do that, but that has to be at a properly noticed committee meeting open to the members. So any member that wants to attend can come at 9 a.m. and watch the validation process, and then they'd come back at 3 p.m. for the actual annual meeting. And of course, the thought behind that is the annual meeting will go a lot quicker, especially for you guys, because you're a pretty big condominium, right? I mean, you probably regularly get 100 or more election ballots. For a condominium association that's 30 condominiums, that might only get 15 ballots back, it's not that big a deal to validate at the same time as the meeting. So I hope that all makes sense. I think for the future, the mistake perhaps that was made is you had the owners put their proxy in the same outer envelope that they put their election ballot, the inner election envelope with their election ballot. In the future, you should, well, the way to properly handle that is just don't open them. You can't, you're not allowed. And you would just have to wait until the annual meeting. And when you open them, then you can separate the proxy and figure out if you have a quorum, because you're not required to have a quorum for the election. All you're required is to have valid ballots cast by 20% of the unit owners. So there's 248, so 20% of that is 50, right? Is that? So as long as you have 50 unit owners that cast a valid ballot, okay, now you can't, obviously any that were disregarded don't count towards that 50. But let's say you end up with 100 ballots, you're good, even though you don't have a quorum, because a quorum is 51%. So of 248, that's 126. Okay, you all understand that? So even if you don't have 126 present in person or by proxy, you can still have a valid election as long as you have 50 people casting a valid ballot. So that's what it means to validate. So that was the issue here. The other way to handle that is to give a third envelope for the proxy, clearly labeled the proxy envelope, and they can put their proxy in that envelope and mail that back. And that envelope you can open immediately upon receipt. Okay, you don't have to wait. But if somebody mistakenly puts it in the outer envelope, well, you're just not going to know that they did that until the night of the annual meeting. Any questions? Okay.
Right. Thank you, Andrew.
When I came in here, and it was nothing against Dwight, I really tried to prevent us being accused of falsifying the election. And in the process of that, if someone came in and pressed charges going to the ombudsman, we would, number one, be probably fined. We would have to do another election, and they would probably demand that we pay to have monitors here. So I knew what I was talking about, and Dwight authenticated it, and Andrew authenticating everything that the knowledge that I have. Okay, so but we've always been allowed to put the proxy in because the proxies then were counted either in front of a previous meeting or at the day of the meeting, and there was never a problem. Okay, because we've had, I know of at least one section here that did a problem with the election, and they're the fines that they had. And I didn't want to see us get involved in it, so it was nothing against Dwight. My feeling is, you know, we don't even know, the board doesn't, I don't know who was on his committee. I didn't even know he was appointed to the committee. And somewhere in the docs it says an impartial committee appointed by the board. So if we weren't told this, I don't even know what his job was. And we should have been told that portion also. Then as I went through and I looked at the documents that were sent out, there were several contradictions to the laws. Okay. One of them was the amount of proxy or attendance needed. It says 125 in the letter. Okay, that's 126. That one person makes a difference. Okay. The other thing is that the ballots are supposed to be alphabetically by surnames. Okay. And no incumbent put on there. Our ballots have incumbent put on there. That's another break to the law, okay? So those two things really concern me, that no one, if they would pick this up, no one could stop the election at that point in time. And we would be penalized for it, probably financially too. So And then the last thing is, if there was a change in the ballot, and if you didn't have enough time to submit information out to your unit owners within that 14 days notice, you had to cancel that election and process a whole new one. And these are things that I knew that were in the regulations. And they're still in the regulations. They haven't changed them. So, there are things that are out there that we were not complying with. And I think, since we asked that everybody complies with planning and windows and storm windows and all this other stuff, I mean, we have to be careful what we're doing. If not, we can be punished from the state, not from the local people, but from the state. And that was my main purpose, to find out what was going on. If we're changing the ballots, that's another important situation that we need to look at. So, Andrew, am I right or wrong? That's up to you.
Well, Rich, you are correct that a ballot is not allowed to list incumbents or identify who the incumbents are. You are correct that it has to be alphabetized by surname. And you're largely correct. I mean, if this was a first violation, I don't know that you'd be fined. You might be. But you would be ordered to redo the election. You'd probably be ordered to start the election over from the second notice. So you'd still have all the same candidates, but you'd have to you wouldn't throw it out. You have to keep everything, but you would have to send out a new second notice and basically start over from that point.
And
Excuse
so,
me.
and that was something that hold on, Bob, we're going to first have the board discussion, and then we're going to have inputs from the folks, the residents, if you don't mind.
This is relative to this discussion.
Okay, I want to make sure that we're all clear. Yes, Richard stopped this process. It was appropriate for him to stop it. But I want to be very clear that they're not the responsibility of Dwight. It's not the responsibility of Terry Marie. It's not the responsibility of anyone but the members of this board, and we own it. And those of us who were directly involved in it, we consider ourselves spanked on this one. A lot of things happen around here when you got 7 people trying to volunteer their time and get things done. No, as I said in the beginning, no one did anything intentionally or with the purpose of doing something wrong or illegal. And the best we can say is that we stopped the process when we found out the process was incorrect. And we went to Andrew, and the choices were 2. We could start the election over again, not the proxy piece, because the proxy piece was still fine, but the balloting could also be done over again. And if that was what Andrew said was the right fix to make this thing done properly, we absolutely would be doing it. There was another option, and particularly I do one of these because we had the number of board seats open for the number of candidates who wanted to be elected. Now, one of those board seats is a 1-year term, and so that takes some movement and some process to handle that too. But if we had had 7 people running for 5 board seats, then it would have been a whole different conversation, and we would have, without a doubt, just said, move forward with the proxies and let's redo the election balloting process. And it would have cost us the money and time to resend those ballots out. So on behalf of, I'm not looking for board members to stand up here and say, I screwed up, because there isn't a member of this board who hasn't screwed up royally at least a couple of times. If you haven't, I'd like to hear about a perfect record, because I don't know of a perfect record anywhere. The point is that nobody tried to do anything wrong. Nobody was intending to put the community at any risk. And as soon as we found out that there was an issue, the first phone call was made to Andrew, our attorney, who gave us the information that you just got, as well as the options that we could take. So I apologize on behalf of the board members. We need to do a better job of preparing for these things. It would be nice if we had proper processes written down so that incumbents who come into various roles would have a starting place. We really don't have that. And in this case, we didn't go looking for it. So we own it. We not only have to fix this, but we have to fix it so it doesn't happen again. If it's okay with the board, I'm going to ask Bob to speak because he has something pertinent to this.
Yeah,
Bob, please.
first of all, I beg to, you do have instructions, and those are in 718. It's
I
clear,
meant
it's
local
clear, it's clear, and
instructions.
two things are clear to me. 718 specifically says that the secretary of the board is responsible to conduct the election. The secretary of the board chooses the electing inspector, who in turn then takes care of the count, which has always been done publicly. The second thing is, it's obvious to me that with no disrespect, that the members of this board are not well-versed in 718. You need to read it. You need to read it again. And you need to read it again, because as Andrew knows, other than Andrew, who's trained as an attorney, it's not the simplest language to read, but it's all there. And so we don't need separate documents. There is a parent document that tells you how to run an election. They're very serious about it for COAs. So, you know,
I appreciate that, Bob. And my intent is that when you have a board such as we have, and the roles change on a regular basis, that first of all, 718 is a tremendous document, but it does take reading it over and over and over and over again. And like anything else, I'm sure you've experienced in your life and the rest of us, that if you ain't using it, you lose it. So when you have an election once a year, and the players that were in positions of responsibility are changing either once a year or more often, you run the risk of dropping ball. And I'm the firm here to say, anyone who has any comments about it, we're here to listen because we dropped the ball on this. We dropped the ball. I'm thankful that the ball was dropped and it didn't create more of an issue than it quite possibly could have. But we need to do a better job when a job is being handed over from one director to another. There needs to be conversations about what's going on and what the responsibilities of that role are, regardless of what it is, to make sure that the next person coming on knows exactly what it is that they're responsible for and what's in process and what they need to do. And they've got all the documentation they need to fulfill that particular assignment on the board. And that goes for every one of us. And we're going to have to work on doing that. We're going to have to do a better job.
And I'll interject just one thing. I mean, what Bob said is largely correct. 718 does spell out, but actually a lot of these regulations are also in a document called the Florida Administrative Code. And you would really have to know what you're doing to find that. Like, for example, the whole inner and outer envelope system, I don't think that's really spelled out in 718. It's spelled out in the Florida Administrative Code. So I'm not trying to defend anything that happened. Lots of our clients go through the process without our help because they don't want to incur the legal fees for us to prepare the documents. But perhaps maybe next year, you have Randall and I prepare the documents. And then you can use those documents as a template then for future. So spend a little bit of money now on legal fees to prevent something like this happening down the road. Because once we prepare the documents, and we'll give them to you in Word format, save them on your computer. Terry Marie can save them on the computer. For future years, I don't want to make it sound like that's all you're doing. I mean, you got to make sure you do it right. And we have clients that have us do it every single year. But at least if we do it once, you kind of see how the process goes if it's done by an attorney, and you can have relative comfort that we would do it in perfect compliance with Florida law.
Thanks, Andrew. We'll take that
Yeah.
up. Are
And
there other comments or questions or issues regarding where we are today, how we got to this place today?
can I just say again that, I'm not pinpointing anyone. okay, they're saying they did something wrong because they really didn't know what the laws were. And, we need to be confident that we have to change and make certain that this doesn't happen again, as Andrew just said. We have to do that. I mean, this happened, example, this happened with Bob at one election when the committee was in there counting votes and they wanted screens across the window. Remember that, Bob? Right. And he came to me and he said, are we allowed to do it? And I said, absolutely not. They have to be visible to the unit owners. So, my main point is that, when this is going to happen, we need to sit, we need to talk to people so that they know exactly what's occurring. And something like this, and nobody will be penalized because of it.
I
So
feel
I'm
comfortable
not
that
there
we've
for,
covered it and everybody understands fully at this point.
yeah, but I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying we need to be more open and need to
Yeah,
talk
we
more.
understand what you said. I think it's time to move on personally.
Okay, so that's where we're at. So in our conversations with Andrew, the alternative to having another ballot, and given the situation we're in with the number of candidates we have, I decided to start talking to the people who are running for election and asking if anyone would volunteer to do the following. In order to not have to process a new ballot for the election, we would need one of the candidates to remove themselves from the election for a 2-year seat and be willing to be appointed by the board to the seat that Dave will vacate next Thursday. And I got to the first person that I talked to, and that was Barbara Milano. And before the words were out of my mouth, Barbara said, well, that's a no-brainer. I would be happy to do that. I can fill that seat. People know me. I'm not concerned about whether I'm there for 1 year or 2 year. And I would be more than happy to rescind my candidacy for the 2 years, contingent upon the board agreeing to seat me for the remainder of Dave's term, which is another year. And then if I want to run again next year, I can run for a 2-year seat at that time. And so I'd like to make a motion at this point that the board approve Barbara Milano to fill the seat that Dave will vacate effective March 24th, 2022 for a 1-year term. That's the first motion, is about whether we would seat her in that seat. May I have a second? May I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Janine. Barbara is completing a 2-year term, which is why this would not happen until March 24th, which is the date of the election. Any other comments, questions?
A question for Andrew. Is this permitted that way? And number two, our ballot says at the bottom, you only vote for 4 people. So what happens if Barbara wasn't even elected? Where are we? Or do we have to do more
We
things?
don't have any extra people.
No,
We don't have
so
any
it
extra
is
people.
permissible. To
Wait.
answer your question,
Wait,
it is permissible. Any candidate was in response to what occurred here, or whether a candidate just changes their mind and doesn't want to run for the board. Any candidate can remove their name from candidacy at any time prior to the annual meeting. Statutes. 718.112.2 D as in David, subsection 2 says an election is not required if the number of vacancies equals or exceeds the number of candidates. So by Barbara withdrawing her candidacy for the 4 seats that are up for election due to the expiration of their 2-year term, it leaves only then 4 candidates for those 4 seats. So you have the same number of candidates as vacancies, so no election is required, which is why they wouldn't have to then mail out and start over from the second notice. And then of course, contingent on the board agreeing to appoint Barbara to then fill the 1 year remaining on David's seat after his resignation. And the reason that that's permissible is both the statute says, and this is 718.112.2, D as in David, subsection 9, says unless otherwise provided in the bylaws, any vacancy occurring before the expiration of a term can be filled by majority vote of the remaining directors. And it says even if there's only 1 remaining director. And your bylaws that have the same provision. So your bylaws match pretty much exactly what the statute says. So, like, for example, let's say after the election, we actually had this happen before. Like soon after an election, all of the directors except 1 resign. Well, guess what? The sole remaining director, even though it's not a quorum of the board, gets to appoint to fill all of the vacancies. Here, it's not so extreme because you only have 1 person resigning, so it's 6 remaining directors can then appoint to fill that vacancy. So yes, this is perfectly acceptable. It's perfectly permissible under the statutes and under your governing documents.
Um,
Fifth person would automatically be on the board. The board does not have to approve
Richard,
any of that.
You're not. No,
No.
you're not. There is no 5th person because Barbara is withdrawing her candidacy. So now there's only 4 candidates
And 4 openings.
for 4 seats. So it's now, yes, left on David's, but that seat isn't deemed to be up for election. You're filling a vacancy because that seat hasn't expired yet. David just decided to resign. So you're still deemed to be electing at the annual meeting 4 directors, but because Barbara withdrew her name, you have an uncontested election. So the 4 candidates, which is Lynn, Janine, and then Santina Rizzo and Tim Ryan, those 4 are automatically seated for 2-year terms, effective as of the conclusion of the annual meeting. And then assuming the board approved the motion that was made, then Barbara would then be seated to fill David's vacancy for the remainder of his term, which is 1 year. Until the 2003 annual meeting or until the successor is duly elected and qualified.
Okay, so I'd like to just I would have had Barbara do that, but she's driving. So I'd like to briefly read to you the signed statement from Barbara Milano dated March 15th, 2022, and directed to the Board of Directors, High Point of Delray Beach, Section 1. Upon my appointment to the vacated seat of David Sherwood for a 1-year term as of March 24th, 2022, I am rescinding my candidacy for the open 2-year terms also to be seated on March 24th, 2022. Thank you. Sincerely yours, Barbara J. Milano, Vice President and Director. There's a copy of that in the mail slot for each director as well. Andrew, I'll give you a copy of that if you would like. Are there any other comments, questions, discussion that need to be had before we vote on the motion to seat Barbara in the 1-year term? Hearing none, I call for a vote. All in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Barbara,
Aye. Aye.
opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. The second motion that I think needs to be made is and to continue on. So a second motion is to continue on with the proxy votes for the annual meeting coming up next Thursday. There are no other items on the agenda. but we need to continue forward in the process. See, Richard, I'm trying to get better at this. We need to continue on the process of the required annual meeting. And so the proxies that have already been looked at are fine
Yes.
because they have nothing to do with the ballots. So we will continue to collect those proxies and we will have an annual meeting next week. It will be very brief. It will be to note whether or not we have the appropriate proxies to have a quorum. If we don't have quorum, we will not move forward on the annual meeting because you must have quorum. And then it's up to the board of directors to determine whether or not to seek quorum for another another meeting. But given that there's nothing on the agenda for that meeting, there isn't a need, there would not be a need for us to go forward to have an attempt a second annual meeting. Is that, did I say that
Correct. Yeah,
correctly?
yeah. A lot of people get that confused. The only thing you're voting on at this meeting is the election of directors. So I never like to say this because it sounds almost flippant in a way. But in a way, it doesn't matter whether you have a quorum for your annual meeting because you're not voting on anything else. If you were voting, like you guys remember that one year I was here for that meeting where we tried to do all those amendments. And I think we got some maybe to the bylaws articles that were approved, but I think the ones to the declaration failed. Well, there you were voting on something else. So for that annual meeting, you had to have a quorum. Otherwise, you had no meeting and the votes for the amendments would fail. Or if you were voting to waive reserves, or if you were voting to do anything else, a vote on alterations to come, then it's important that you have a quorum. Because without it, any vote is invalid and fails. Again, the election is the exception because the election only requires 20%. Now Randall and I, we always still try to get a quorum if we can, because there are some other things that occur at an annual meeting. Like sometimes you have officer reports, you have committee reports. Sometimes you do have a vote, although it's really not that crucial, but you vote to approve the minutes from last year's meeting. Well, you can't do that without a quorum. So we always try to get a quorum, if for no other reason, just so we can say, hey, we did actually have our annual meeting this year. This year, the failure to get a quorum has virtually, well, not virtually, it has no consequence. Because, and you don't even need 50 ballots because you have an uncontested election now. So, you know, the 4 new people will be seated as of the conclusion of the annual meeting, or if there's no quorum at the end of the day, and you can move on.
How does that, is there a particular series of steps, or is it just automatic that those people are now seated on the board in those 4 seats? Do we?
It's automatic.
It's automatic.
Yeah, now that occurred, that's a
Right.
different meeting. That's
Right.
the organizational meeting of
And
the
we have
board.
scheduled that and posted that that's for the 26th. Bob?
I have a question for council. Is the quorum required to make the meeting official, or is the quorum required for the balloting? We are obligated by law, the COA, to hold an annual meeting, correct?
Correct.
And in order to hold the annual meeting, you have to have a quorum of the owners, correct?
Well, you are required to attempt to have your annual meeting. If you don't have a quorum, you can't force owners to show up for a meeting. So I see where you're going with it, but if you schedule your annual meeting, but you fail to obtain a quorum, you're not violating the law.
So if you don't have something to vote on, then there's no
well,
sense in going through the process of trying to get quorum.
Yeah,
after
this is
you
going to
fail.
sound confusing, Bob, but the answer to your question, yeah, we still have a legal meeting. Yes and no. You've complied with the statutory obligation to schedule and conduct an annual meeting, but because you have no quorum, technically there's no meeting. But you still have a valid election. Although even that's a little bit deceiving because you don't actually have an election because it's an uncontested election. So the 4 new board members are legally and validly seated to 2-year terms and you have complied with your statutory obligation to schedule and conduct an annual meeting.
Dwight, did you have a question?
So I guess the question is, do the directors want to have quorum for their annual meeting? I suspect the answer is yes, but it's up to you.
I mean, do we want, I don't know, it matters whether we want to or not. We have to fulfill our process
Okay,
of attempting to reach quorum for a meeting. We can't force anyone to do it, and we hope.
Yeah, and I would always
And
answer
there's
that
nothing-
question,
There will be
yes.
nothing, right. And there will be nothing on the agenda for the meeting. So if we have quorum, we will have quorum and we will open the meeting, and having no business to
Yeah.
conduct. And if we don't have a quorum, then as I understand it from legal counsel, we can choose then to either try to reschedule or move on. We've made our attempt, met our statutory obligations of scheduling a meeting, and the owners have determined not to come and participate, and we can't force them.
Right, but there is no business
There
to be
is no
conducted. So if you don't have a quorum, you would announce the new board. But yeah, you can conduct no business, meaning no other vote can occur. Okay, now we have plenty of clients that even in the absence of a quorum, if they have like a president's report or like a landscape committee report, they'll still go ahead and do the reports just to give the information to the owners. It doesn't really matter because you're not voting on anything. There's no action that is resulting as a result of reading the actual report. I'll leave it up to you whether you want to do that because technically there's no meeting, but lots of our clients do that. And as far as to whether you're going to try to reschedule so you can get your quorum, when you have no other business to conduct, in my opinion, that's a waste of time and money. Because to do that, you have to send out a new notice mailed to all 248 units. Why? Why would you do that? You're not voting on anything else. That's just a waste of time and money, in my opinion. Okay. But as far as the initial attempt, I would answer Dwight's question. Yeah, of course, always the directors want to get a quorum if possible. But here, because there's no other business to be conducted, if you don't, it's no harm, no foul.
okay. I had a second question in the same vein. Now that there's no election, can we go ahead and open the quorum ballots to get that count? Or is that something that we have to wait until that meeting and open?
I
those?
think you can go ahead and open them and pull out the proxies at this point because you have an uncontested election. So there's no election. So you're not really violating anything by
Okay.
doing that anymore.
Okay,
And left to my own devices, I would say, and destroy unopened all of those ballots that are in the.
No,
already
you
received.
must save everything
Save them?
for 1 year,
That's why I asked. For 1 year. So we put them up, but unopened.
but unopened. Yeah, I mean, you
Unopened.
can open again, you can open to see if there's any proxies and pull those out, but everything should be saved.
Okay.
And yeah,
so-
none of the election ballots should be opened. The inner unmarked, you should not. And in fact, you should leave the inner unmarked, even if you're opening the outer envelope, leave the inner unmarked envelope within there so we know who it came from. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you pull the proxy out, when and if you pull any proxies out, leave the inner. You understand what I'm saying? Leave
Yeah.
the inner
Put it back
unmarked,
in.
put it back in the outer envelope. You can tape it if you want or whatever, so it doesn't fall out, and keep all of that for 1 year. Okay, so that at next year, after you do next year's annual meeting, 2023, you can throw out all the 2022 stuff.
okay, this is in my bit of work that I did, I noticed that people have difficulty doing it correctly. People, if they're coming to the meeting, why would I fill out a proxy?
Well, they don't have to. That's correct. They don't have to.
Okay,
The reason I would explain to them if they're asking you, Dwight, or any board member, if they call and say, well, I'm going to be at the meeting, do I have to fill out a proxy? If it was me sitting in the office answering that question, I would say, well, what if something comes up and you can't make it? I would say, go ahead and still fill out your proxy, because If you fill out a proxy and then you show up at the meeting, a proxy can be rescinded at any time. At any time. Well, yes and no, Bob. This board, I would be very surprised if this is a problem. I just don't think it would, because you guys seem to be a really good, tight-knit, harmonious board. We have some clients, and I'm not naming any, so it's not like I'm violating any confidence here, but we have some clients where they have people on the board that probably shouldn't be on the board. They've got an axe to grind, they're mean, they're vindictive, and owners are afraid for the board to know how they voted on a specific issue, because if they don't vote the way that the board wants them to vote, they're afraid the board's going to come after them. So that's why, so people don't understand the difference between forget election ballots, that's different, a ballot and a proxy on a vote. Some people don't want to submit a proxy because they don't want the board to know how they voted, because there's no way to avoid that on a proxy. You check the box and you have to sign it and put your unit number. So anybody, whether it's the board or another unit owner that does a records inspection, can figure out exactly how that owner voted on that particular issue or issues. That's why some owners are paranoid that they always show up at the meeting and then they get a ballot, and the ballot is supposed to be anonymous. So when I do the proxy, you've got there's a form on the in the DPPR website. It's not allowed to be anonymous by law. That's what a proxy is. But a ballot has all the same voting things, but there's nowhere for the owner to sign or put their unit number. So it's completely anonymous. I mean, unless you only have one person casting a ballot, then you can go and check, right? But and the person that the registrar or whoever has to be very careful. That's why you have the roster of unit owners. And what I do if I'm running a meeting, I would have a roster and I would have a box listed proxy, and I would have a box right next to it listed ballot. The ballots, you never, with the exception of the election ballot, you never distribute those in advance. In advance, you only distribute the limited proxy, because absentee ballots are not allowed for any vote other than the election of directors. Okay, but you have a stack of these ballots at the meeting, and then if an owner shows up, okay, so Bob, let's say you show up, I'm at the meeting, okay. Oh, Bob, okay, here's your name. I go to the boxes and there's nothing checked next to proxy. So I know that you didn't already submit a proxy. So then I got no problem handing you a ballot, right? Because I have to make sure I'm not letting you vote twice. If I go to your name, however, and I say, oh, Bob, you already submitted a proxy. Do you want to rescind your proxy? Which is your right. If you say yes, I'd go through my pile of proxies. I'd pull yours out. I'd say, okay, you're sure you want to rescind? You say yes. I would tear it up in your presence, and then I would hand you a ballot. Okay. And if we pre-counted the votes, because you're allowed to do that, other than the election, you're allowed to we would have to then just make sure if we've already opened all the proxies and we said, okay, we've got 100 yes votes and 10 no votes, but you just rescinded your proxy and I'm handing you a ballot. I don't know how you're going to vote now. Now I've got to go to my vote total and take that 100 yes votes down to 99 because you just rescinded your proxy. So there's some nuance there, or you could just wait to count the votes to the meeting so you don't have to worry about that. Does that make sense? So a proxy becomes a ballot, yes and no, right? Like if the owner doesn't care about being anonymous, even if they show up at the meeting, they can say, no, just keep my proxy, but I'm here. So the designated proxy holder, which it's probably more often than not the default proxy holder, the secretary of the association, if something comes up, the owner is allowed to speak for themselves. Or if you're voting to recess to reconvene, the owner can cast that vote rather than the default proxy holder.
Thanks. Any more conversation? Do I even need to make the motion to move forward with the proxy
No,
process?
you don't.
So I rescind that request. And I close this piece of the discussion here with, again, my sincere apologies for myself and on behalf of the community for any aggravation, confusion, potential liability that we may have inadvertently caused through this process. I certainly have learned the lesson for this one that we all need to be a lot more diligent when it comes to these kinds of processes. I think we may be we've gotten a little too informal and need to make sure that what we're doing is appropriate and legal and for everything, but particularly in things of such importance as the annual meeting, changes and amendments, and elections, because they do have such consequences. After that, is there any other business that needs to come before the committee? Janine? No, we probably don't. You don't want to stay in here about the pig roast, do you, Andrew? Yeah, you do. And get out of here. I would also like to thank Andrew, who has been Johnny on the spot for a couple of conversations about this and willing to come out here this afternoon. I think you did a great job in explaining it clearly and concisely what is and isn't appropriate. And I appreciate your help and guidance and support in all that we do. So thank you very much. All right. Yeah. Oh, no. So Barbara has.
I had some other business.
Where you going, Bill?
I have other business.
I don't know. All right. No, he went, not unless he's going in the kitchen. I was getting a drink of water. All right, Barbara, go ahead. Let's start.
Okay.
Here he is.
When we
Thank you, Andrew.
when we started the thought of the luau and the anniversary party, it was, I'm talking into the mic, and it was, we thought there would be about 75 people. And this is when we were going, this goes far back as when we were doing the budget. We didn't realize that the activities was going to take off so much, after we came back. We never had more than 75 people at anything. And so we thought that was a good number. Well, now we've reached over 80 at the last party. It's kind of up and up and up, and people are enjoying it. And but we had planned for the 75. I would like to say that I was wrong. I think that maybe I should have thought that we were going to have 100, but I didn't. And we want to open, the committee would like to open up the seating inside the clubhouse, but so that we could seat up to 100 or more and use the outside, but we don't really have the money to do so. I'm looking to the board or someone to help me. Maybe, I think it's only going to be another $500, but I would like to say that I'd like to not exceed $1,000. So I'm asking for the board to give the social committee, add up to their budget another $1,000, and whatever's we don't use. It's yours.
So how many people do you have now? Do you know?
No, it was 75.
Yes.
In 24 hours, it was 75 people.
And
24 hours.
And how many
Because
people
Bonnie
do
was-
we have? Bonnie's checking. I think there's a wait list. So listen,
I don't want to turn any unit owners away.
right. And I don't see how we turn unit owners away. I
mean-
well, I guess we have to. We have to.
I mean,
But
there are no guests.
there are no guests
We are not
being allowed.
allowing guests of any kind.
Bonnie's
So
counting. I'm going to say. Hold on for a second. Do you have a number for us, Bonnie? Or are you working on it?
And I'll tell you why that was. Somebody called me yesterday and said that people were putting names on 2 lines. So therefore, they added those. Yeah, 2 names on 1 line. Yeah, right. 2 names on 1 line, and that was not you. Then they were, being not
So-
being counted.
So let's get a count here of exactly where we are at right now and so what you're saying is we had at least 75 already sign up. I know people are being told they're waitlisted. It's pissing people off, and I hate for that to be the case because they're owners, and just because they didn't run up here the very first day and sign up, I don't want to see people not be able to come. I believe we can handle in terms of space. I think we can handle the people that want to come by using the inside and the outside. And, if it means that we have to pay the per head cost, Bonnie, did you want to? Okay. If we need to go up in the cost, I think as long as it's not out of hand, I'd like to do it. And I'd like to say that between Dave and I, maybe we could look at our budgets and see if we can't find places where we could commit to squeeze, up to 500 total between our budgets and grounds and buildings without hurting any of our plans, and not
Absolutely.
spend that money so that we don't end up with our budget out of whack. Up to 1,000 between us. I'd also like to hear from Janine as the treasurer, whether you think that request for 500 to 1,000, if necessary, up to 500 or 1,000 is necessary, is a spend that we can afford.
I believe we can find that, especially where you mentioned which accounts it would come from. And I certainly want to please the community. I don't want to turn anyone around, and I think we should do it very quickly because it's adding more and more people every minute.
I think this is a real learning. What you say? Yeah, but wait. Some people might have just walked away, is what we're saying. Some people may have walked away without signing it. I just need the number of what we've got right now. And listen, this is the social committee has been more successful in their events than anyone's wildest dreams. And unlike the men's and women's club, who have a pretty strong and deep experience in the parties and the events that they've held before, for a lot of this, it's a first timer, like this party, right? This we're talking about right now. So, I'm delighted that people want to be involved, that they want to come, that they want to participate, that they enjoy and appreciate the parties and the fun. I'm beat from the number of things we have. We have 102 right now. So 125 is probably about the right number. We had 77 people, I think, here. What was
About roughly 85.
5 people here for the pizza party last week, which, other than serving the pizza, was 100% outside, and it was very comfortable. I think if we're allowing people to also use the tables in here for eating, and the photo opportunity would be in here, then we should certainly, I believe, you're right. We should certainly be able to, I think, manage 125, but we are going to say 125 is a max, because that's the max that we can do. And that's about half of the unit owners. So, all right. So that's the situation at hand. Bonnie, did you get a number? 102?
102.
Okay, so she's got 102. I'm looking for a motion to approve expenditures, if necessary, of up to $1,000 for the party. 2 people. That's right. There's a, right, and there's a lot, there's a lot of people that aren't here, and there's a lot of people that won't come,
Do
and
you think
you know.
that with the people that maybe have turned away, that maybe an email should maybe go back out?
well, I don't know who they are. I don't know who they
Okay.
are. You want to? I don't want. I also don't
can-
want to start a stampede, Dave. You
can-
know, I mean,
Yeah.
well.
Can
so
we put
we'll
a
have to
notice?
Send something.
Can we put a notice right on 97 and tell the people that, we're extending it if you tried to sign up and now it's
Right.
going to be open for
Right.
another 25
25.
or 30 people?
Yeah.
mean,
So I.
That's why I'm
I
saying.
mean, we can certainly do that. I can send out the electronic communication to all the homeowners by email that makes sure everybody gets it and say we can accept up to 25 more people. Yep. Right. If you've already signed up and waitlisted yourself, you're on. Right. That's right. That's right. Huh? Right. Right. 25. Right. And there has to be a little note that says one person per line. So if Joe and Susie Smith are coming, Joe's on one line and Susie's on the other. Right. It's a tough problem to have. Too many people want to come to your party. It's like a wedding, right? Who are you going to piss off by not inviting? Right. So
Yes, I have it. I'm collecting the money. Yeah.
all right.
So I'm going to take the list down if you don't mind, and I'll update it. I'll type it to with the number of people that are there right now, and then quit at 125, wherever 125 lines at that, and then say, put something to finalize it.
Okay, so can we just move? I had a motion on the table to allow the social committee to spend up to $1,000 additional to their budget if necessary on the party. And a second, Richard, second, can we have a vote here and then we can talk about the details of the list? And that is all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Barbara, you still there? I think she might be up. Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, so now I think we don't need to stay in session of the board to finish this conversation, but we can finish this conversation with the people in the room. So motion to adjourn. Janine, second. Richard, in favor? Aye. Ayes have it. The meeting is adjourned. So what I'm hearing is I want to put a communication out to people that says we can take 25 more names of people. If you haven't signed up, sign up by the end of the day, Friday. All reservations must be accompanied by a $20 deposit. If you haven't put money in the box, it must be in, and your seat will not be reserved for you. It will go to someone else. Okay? 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.